You're tuned into 9 to 5 Work Rebels with your host, Ebony Gale. This podcast is sponsored by the PRCA's Race, Ethnicity and Equity Board. Visit prca.org.uk/REEB to find out more.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Gems in Comms series special brought to you by the 9 to 5 Work Rebels podcast. I am your host, Ebony Gale, and today I'm really pleased to be speaking with AnnMarie Blake, who is an award-winning senior communications professional and the co-founder of True, a boutique consultancy. So welcome, AnnMarie.
Welcome. It's lovely to be here. Thank you, Ebony. Thank you for inviting me.
Most welcome. So just as a background, the idea of this podcast is to explore lived experiences, but also to give, senior communicators of color their flowers, for carving out, a wonderful career for yourself. So kudos to you for doing that. Okay. So that's one of the main things we want to do. And then we want to get into, a bit about you. So one of the first questions, obviously, I'll start off with is, please, can you tell us about yourself and what you do?
Yeah, that's really interesting, actually, because normally I'm kind of behind the camera, as it were, kind of coaching other people. And it's really interesting kind of having to talk about me. But yes, you're right. So I co-founded True with my partner, Howard Craig. He's an ex-colleague and a good friend. So we set up properly in February 2023, after thinking about it for a long time. So I, for the last 12 years, have been doing interim work, but in big corporate organizations, predominantly large financial services. And then prior to that, I was at NatWest and RBS. And I'm really fortunate that I've had a really varied career. So I didn't start my career within comms. I was in marketing and I was in a product role. But one of the benefits of working for a big organization is that it gives you an opportunity to try things you hadn't tried before. And I'm very lucky that someone that I worked with when I was heading up marketing invited me to become a head of comms and PR in the European division. So that was my introduction to comms. No formal training. Didn't know what I was doing, had to pick it up as I went along. But fortunately, my mistakes were few and hidden, I guess. So that's kind of a bit about me. So I have lots of different hats that I wear. So I've got my paying the bills hat, which is obviously working in True, but, it's an opportunity to do something that we really love. I have my volunteer hat. So I'm a serial volunteer, do a lot of work in the industry. So I'm on the board of the International Association of Business Communicators, so headquartered in North America. I am a founder board member of REEB, the Race, Ethnicity and Equity Board, which is a standing committee of PRCA. And I also teach for them as well. And I'm also a member of the CIPR. So I'm an equal opportunities volunteer, kind of. I do things throughout the bodies.
Yeah. Love it. Love to hear it. Well, that sounds really interesting. And shout out to PRCA REEB, who are sponsoring this podcast. So that's wonderful. So have you always, basically you fell into it. So you haven't really always wanted to work in comms, but you wanted to work in marketing. And to me, they're sisters. They're sisters. So it's interesting. So you first thought, okay, I want to go and do marketing, and you did that and then fell into comms. What attracted you to the marketing industry then?
So I'm really interested in that introduction because it assumes some sort of forethought in terms of what my career was going to be. So I started working a long time ago, and originally I was going to join the Navy, which is totally different. But at the time I was planning on joining the Navy, apart from the fact I don't particularly like swimming, women didn't go on the ships, and I didn't really fancy, spending all my time in an office, which is ironic, really, because that's kind of what I have done. And then I wanted to become a court stenographer. So one of the things I learned was shorthand. I in my day, I could do 120 words a minute shorthand. So I wanted to become a court stenographer. But when I left school, I interviewed, and NatWest offered me a job, and I took it. So I joined, personnel, so HR, I think we call it now. So HR.
Personal.
And yeah, it's interesting because I'm talking like I'm an old age pensioner now, but in those days, like your career was very much set out for you. So you were tiered, so it gave you an idea of where you were expected to go within your career.
Right.
amazing to think about it now. So anyway, I kind of moved around the organisation, and I just happened to do a really good job, actually, head of student banking. So going around all the different universities, encouraging them to come and bank with us. Did a very good job marketing that. I was also the spokesperson, which was my introduction into media. So I had to be media trained. And that's why I think that when I was invited to kind of go and head up comms and PR is because, my boss thought that I had common sense and I could kind of turn my hand to things. And actually, it coincided with a really quite interesting time in financial services. So I've done kind of mergers, acquisitions, kind of restructures, financial crisis in terms of crisis comms as well. So it's kind of given me a relatively good grounding.
Absolutely. I do love crisis comms. Absolutely. Okay. Well, thank you for sharing that. That's really interesting to hear. So before I want to get into a bit more about your lived experience and your journey, one of the questions I always like to start off with is when did you become aware of your ethnicity? So for me, obviously you're born, you're a Black young lady, but essentially one of my kind of stark moments was heading to school as a secondary child, just starting secondary school. And so I was like 11 because I was one of the younger ones in the year. And then hearing about basically Chelsea Smilers and how they'll target Black and brown people. And they were called Chelsea Smilers because they take a razor and they cut like a smile across your face. And I just remember just thinking, my gosh, like this is absolute insanity. Because obviously, I've seen things like Mississippi burning. I've seen certain things my mum would show me, but it was very much a very stark reality for me personally in my journey. So about you.
Oh goodness, what a question. So I'm not sure is the honest answer to that. So I grown up in South London. So South London by definition is kind of very mixed. My
I'm
family.
South London. Yeah. The area I was talking about is more Old Kent Road. My school is down Old Kent Roadway. So
right, yes, because I would never go to some pubs in the Old Kent Road, for that reason, yes.
Yeah.
So my family is kind of very mixed and very blended, and I went to a school which was very kind of mixed and very blended. So it hasn't been, even though it was at the time of maybe kind of the Brixton riots and kind of other things going on, it's not something that I paid that much attention to, which sounds really quite odd. So I think one of the kind of eye-openers for me is because when the way that I've worked my job, and I heard this phrase from Jen Thomas, and it kind of really resonated with me, was around the whole blending. Yeah, so I kind of had a really good career because I blended and I can code switch and I behaved differently in different environments. But one of the eye-openers for me was when I was at a different bank, and there was a big comms conference going on, and by that time I was relatively senior, I guess.
Okay.
And this young girl ran up to me. She almost ran up to me and she was like, "Oh my goodness, I didn't realize there was anyone like that was Black that worked in comms." She goes, "I just didn't realize, and let alone at your level." And because I'd always been very serious about my work and I just literally got my head down and I didn't kind of involve myself in anything, I never put my head above the parapet. You wouldn't see me speaking at anything. I was just doing my work. That's one of the things that really kind of reinforced to me the importance of kind of role models and kind of being out there as well. So I'm not quite sure whether it's a kind of direct answer to your question, but I don't have that kind of like experience that you had. Obviously there was places I didn't go, so I didn't spend any time in Eltham if I could possibly help it. Sorry, Eltham, but that was around the Steve Lawrence time.
Yeah, same.
I didn't go to certain pubs down the Old Kent Road, but that's kind of, for me, that was about being kind of street smart as well.
And safe. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you had to be street smart and safe. But I think that's interesting because there wasn't any moment throughout where it kind of jolted you and you thought, okay, that was it. So I think that's interesting. That's your journey.
Well, I mean, there's a couple of stories. I have a very good friend. We've been friends since we were 5 years old. So my friend Tony, and Tony is white. But Tony used to come to Black Church with us when we were growing up, when we were very, very young. And people used to say, "Oh, right, like it's Black Church," and Tony would be like, "Oh my goodness, I didn't realise. Anne, did you realise that you were Black?" And I'd be like, "No, Tony." So we had a bit of a joke around that, but other than that,
that's hilarious.
We still do it now, actually, when we're messing about.
It's I bet you do. Did you know? Like, that's hilarious. So my next question, Maggie, is about whether you've ever felt like race or your ethnicity has ever held you back in your career.
So at the time, no, as I've been like kind of moving up the ladder. But when I look back on it, I think it probably has. So there are lots of what we call kind of stereotyping. So some people can be assertive,
Yeah.
whereas I am aggressive.
Yeah.
Or I was always kind of brought up to work twice as hard,
Yeah.
kind of for half as much. So, whilst I, kind of financial services, kind of you blend and stuff, occasionally you'd see people kind of moving up the ladder a little bit quicker.
Yeah.
And whilst, that was never said, you're never quite sure whether it's,
That
kind of
kind
your
of
race,
covert. Yeah.
your
Yeah.
class, or
Yeah.
your sex that kind of is, or your gender, sorry, that is kind of holding you back. So at the time, no, I didn't really notice it. And but looking back, I'm thinking, all right, maybe if I'd have been a bit smarter then maybe I would have got up the ladder a little bit quicker.
Yeah, interesting. It's interesting. And I think it's also interesting that you say, you're brought up to work 2 times or, harder. I think as everyone has said that on this podcast, like literally as people of color, we are raised to work much more harder because we know what we're kind of faced against, But it's interesting. I think that's really interesting. Okay, and that's also interesting because obviously as you reflect back, a lot of people have said that too. Like you might not notice it when you're going through your career and then you stop and you think, oh, hang on a minute. Actually, when I look at that, maybe person A had moved up a bit more than me and they came in maybe after me or, it's reflective. But it's good that it wasn't, what I'd say, kind of like in your face as such by the sound of it.
No. And, to be fair, I have got to very, for someone like me from South London, didn't go to university, kind of went to work in banking. I have, had a very good career. I'm not sure that were I starting that now, my career would be the same with the kind of qualifications that I had at that time. But yeah, I mean, you get to where you get to, don't they? And then you see.
Yeah, but you've done really well for yourself. So I think that's brilliant. Have you actually experienced or witnessed racism in the workplace? And if you had, how was it handled?
Oh my goodness me. Have I witnessed it? No, because if I witnessed it, I would generally call it out. I think what's more common, and I've generally worked for big organizations that, don't really tolerate that sort of stuff. Or maybe it's not the organization, maybe it's the bosses that I've worked with that have done that. I mean, what I have seen are kind of more microaggressions and stereotyping.
Right.
Have I seen? No, I've never seen anyone kind of called anything that they shouldn't have been or treated differently. I mean, interestingly, I did read the CIPR report a few years ago that talked about people's lived experiences in agencies predominantly, and obviously I've spoken to people subsequently, and some of it has absolutely made my jaw drop in terms of, oh my goodness, doing work and not being invited to pitch, for example. I've not had that, fortunately, but I know it's a real issue.
It is. It's really bad, actually, because even if you look at, we mentioned Cam earlier and her, the Black Comms Network, they did some research into this as well, and they've got some really good examples of lived experiences, awful ones where, you've got your professionals who are being mistaken for toilet attendees, not being addressed as the lead in the room, that kind of stuff. And even myself, I've had issues of racism in the workplace, but not necessarily at the hands of my employer. One of my instances was actually dealing with one of the public members, because I used to work for the General Medical Council in their press office. So I dealt with a lot of high profile, obviously, cases. And I remember getting a call from a doctor who was in his penthouse who he decided to tell me at the time. I was helping him with a query because at that point, press office took public and press calls. And yes, I was helping with his query, helped him along, got what he needed. And then he's going to say thank you. And he's like, oh, what is your name? And I said, oh, my name is Ebony. And he was in shock. What, Ebony? Are you coloured? And I said, yes, I'm actually black. Yeah, and I'm like, this is on the phone, right? So he's like, are you coloured? And I'm like, I'm black. And then he was like, wow, you're so well spoken. I would never have known. And I ended the call, left it at that. Spoke to some boss about it afterwards, and they were like, what a cheek. Like, they couldn't believe it. But it's just these things that I just said that you just think, okay, as an older doctor, you could tell. But these things happen sometimes, you know what I mean? But sometimes you don't know how to handle it as well. Because even for me, I was a bit taken aback by, I'm not coloured, I'm not going to go sign up to that, but I am black. But it was definitely one of those moments where I was like, ooh, Okay, right. You're welcome for the help.
Yeah. I mean, there have been some things that we kind of laugh about it now. So Paulette, who was my boss at the time,
Yeah.
and I kind of, we're both black and we were both the senior people. And then there was Andy, who was our kind of EA assistant at the time. And so
Right.
whenever we were traveling and check into hotels, they'd automatically assume he was the boss, for example, or kind of give him the upgrade, which we kind of laughed about at the time. Or if we've gone into places, I don't know, say for example, we're flying in business, for example, and we kind of had second looks as if you're in the wrong place. You need to be kind of somewhere else. And I think sometimes, I mean, you can spend like a lot of your time getting quite angry about this sort of stuff, but I choose not to. But I do call it out if it's kind of, and I'm never quite sure whether because it's all the intersectionality. So if I'm at the photocopy and someone automatically assumes that I'm an assistant, I will call that out. Or I've made it my rule not to pour tea and coffee if I'm in a board meeting, because actually I'm in the meeting for kind of my contribution to the meeting, and I don't want people to get confused that I'm there to pour the tea and coffee. So there's a few things that I kind of did to kind of adjust to that.
Yeah, and that's a good point as well. Just being really consciously aware of what you're doing, because you might just be doing it to be nice, but you don't want to fall into certain stereotypes. So I completely get you with that. Yeah. That's really helpful, actually. Thanks for sharing that. So I suppose my question would be next, which doesn't sound like it's going to be necessarily one for you, which is the question you always ask is whether there's a time you've ever wished you spoke up about something, or a time when you did, speak up or self-advocate on behalf of somebody else, perhaps. But if you haven't necessarily witnessed any injustice in that sense in the work.
No, I mean, I haven't witnessed anything what I would call over. I'm not averse to calling out poor behaviours. So if people are being spoken over, for example, or if people are, I mean, it's difficult to think of examples now, if that people are doing things that I believe are kind of inappropriate, but a lot of those tend to be around kind of women as opposed to kind of race particularly. Or if people come to me and they say, I think I've got a bit of an issue, then I kind of will help people kind of work their way through that. But that's kind of my stance.
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So on to code switching. We touched on this a little bit earlier. So, or you certainly mentioned this. So code switching, do you feel we can lead with our authentic voices in the workplace, or will we be forever code switching?
Oh, goodness. I think sometimes code switching is kind of second nature.
Yes, I think so. But I think it depends on the generation. For some of the younger ones coming through, they're like, well, no, I don't really want to code switch, just want to be more authentic self. I feel like some of the older age groups, people who've been in for a number of years, are more like, well, actually, we kind of code switch in the workplace, and when we're at home, it might be a bit more relaxed. So, it's what fits you.
And actually, sometimes when I'm out on the street and I'm listening to people speak, I'm like, I bet you don't go home and use that sort of language. I bet you don't do that, because I'd have been told off. My parents are dead now, but I'd be told off for speaking like that in the house. But I mean, I think it's just about being able to adapt to lots of different circumstances. I've often been in the room where I'm the only in the room, whether it's the only female, the only female of colour that's in the room, and so I kind of tend to kind of hold myself in a certain way within those rooms and speak in a certain way. And then when I'm with my friends, I might be a little bit different. One of my friends described it as being onion-like. She goes, there's lots of different layers to you. But I'm very, very, very used to kind of code switching. And I think, my parents used to say to me, it's very important you learn to eat properly and use your knife and fork properly, because you need to be able to dine with princes, and their words, not my words, princes and paupers or whatever it is. So I kind of like to think that I can, go to lots of different environments and feel relatively comfortable within those environments as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I get that. No, thank you for sharing your thoughts on that one. So in the PR industry, because you said you came from marketing background particularly, right? So when did you become aware of the kind of color bias within the PR and comms industry? Was it more from sort of reading the reports? Because obviously you said you had your head down quite a lot as you entered, didn't you? So
so I think for me, it was reading the census, the PRCA census, a number of years ago. And kind of my view on these sorts of things is that, you do a survey, you see a census, it gives you information, and then you act on that information. But for me, and I don't want to call out the PRCA necessarily, but that census was saying the same thing every single year, but there was no kind of action being taken taken on it, and it's just like, is it just a kind of shrug your shoulders? It like, it is what it is, and that's kind of one of the reasons that we co-founded Read, because actually, sometimes we just have to do the work ourselves rather than waiting for anyone else to do the work. So that's kind of why we did it there. So and that kind of it coincided with a little bit of lockdown, I think, if I'm correct. And George Floyd, yeah. So it was about 3 years ago we set up Read. So I had a bit more time, did a bit more reading around it, to hear more examples about kind of what people were experiencing, because that wasn't my experience. Some of that was pretty much a surprise to me. And also, I've given you the example of when I was at a different bank, and someone came up to me. She goes, "I've never seen anyone else that looks like you that works in PR." So I there are a few more people that look like me now, and the stats are moving. I think might have been 7 or 8% when I was first looking. I think it's 10 or 11. So it creeps, but it creeps.
It's creeping.
It creeps slowly, and there are some really good initiatives around. But I tend to hear, and this is a particular hobby horse of mine, that the Taylor Bennett Foundation do like amazing stuff. They've got the summer stars programs. The organisations think they've done it if they've brought in some Taylor Bennett people, and that's not it. It's around kind of creating the climate that people can enter the profession, and actually that they have a reasonable time when they're there. So there was more research that actually people leaving mid-career, or when I'm speaking to recruiters, they say we can't find anyone. I'm like, well, where are you looking? Because I'm off to Black Comms Network next week, and there's hundreds of us there. So it's about kind of helping those people kind of understand, how to, recruit, and importantly retain and create a climate where kind of people feel kind of valued and included.
Yeah, absolutely agree with you on that. So how's that? So kind of a nice segue into allyship. So what are your thoughts on allyship, and what does it kind of mean to you? What's like a really good example of allyship to you?
So a really good example of allyship to me is sponsoring, advocating, calling out, kind of doing the work. A less good example to me is what can be called performative allyship. Let's just put it that way. So I think if you're just doing something or saying something to tick a box, or because you think it's something that you ought to be doing or saying, then you might as well not bother, as far as I'm concerned. That's just performative. That's not making any kind of other difference at all. Whereas kind of people that are actually doing the work and really kind of helping to kind of make an effect change, and also being willing to learn, I think they're the kind of allies that I'm really kind of happy to. So a couple of allies that have been like absolutely kind of outstanding supporters to me are Tony and so I was going to call them both Langham, no. So Tony and Claire from Lansons. They've been like amazing supporters. Claire's encouraged me to join boards, whereas previously I've said actually board work isn't for me, and she's encouraged me, and she's always asking and being free with her advice, and similar Tony as well. So I would call them real good allies that have been allies, and there for me kind of personally.
Yeah, that's really good. That's really nice. I think it's really interesting, and like you said about the importance of having allies, particularly when you look at the context of what's happening in the United States. And with the removal of the affirmative action programs and things like that, I feel like allyship for our brothers and sisters over there is going to be really important in the coming kind of years as well. Had a by the by. So
there's some interesting initiatives going on about mentorship and sponsorship, and people sign up for really good reasons, and I think maybe a little bit more should be done around helping people to understand what their kind of roles and responsibilities are when they sign up to sponsor and mentor people. So it's not about actually, I need to move this meeting for the 6th time, or I haven't got time to talk to you, or I don't want to have a difficult conversation with you. It's about, if you sign up, and you need to be super supportive.
Yeah, you need to embrace it. And I think it's one of the ladies that I interviewed on this podcast. I think it was Katrina. I love that she said that, it's about what they say about you when you're not in the room. And I thought that's absolutely true. It's so important as well. So yes, good. Thank you for that. So what about you? So what motivates you? What inspires you to keep going?
Oh, well, I have a daughter.
Hey, say what?
No. So, I've always been motivated by kind of being able to effect change. So comms is a big discipline where it's about kind of helping people to think or do something differently. So that's something that's always motivated me. We've set up our own agency, True, because there's about people centric. That's something that we're really quite passionate about. So lots of organisations, they're very top down, or they don't really understand why change hasn't happened. Is because they're not bringing their people with them. They're not taking the time to understand their people and put people at the heart of kind of what they do. So that's something that motivates me. And because I've kind of done the corporate jobs, as it were, this is an opportunity for kind of us to build a business that kind of has got the values and the principles that we want to kind of operate by. But as well as paying bills, which obviously is a big motivator for some people, I'm always motivated by doing a job well. And look, when I speak to kind of PR students, I say this career has taken me around the world. I have been to places that I'd never thought I would go to. I've been to China, I've been to India. They were never on my holiday list. I've been there and I've worked with people and I've met people there. I've had experiences that I would never had before. I'm big into Formula One now because, one of my roles involved, dealing with the sponsorship of Formula One, for example.
Amazing.
So I always say to people, if you want to go into public relations or communications, it's just such a broad and varied career, and that's kind of what really, people, my friends don't really understand what I do. They can just see where I go.
Yeah. That is a theme with family members. We always say the same. Our PRs and comms are like, people don't get what we do we? It's people who are inside. Like, yes, I get what you do. Family members are always miffed a bit like, well, what exactly do you do? But no, it's important work, and that's great to hear. That's really great to hear, and inspiring too. You travel a lot, like you said, you've traveled a lot. It's taking you around the world, so that's amazing. So on your journey,
meeting different people and different cultures and how they work.
Exactly.
That's
so important. It's super important. That's brilliant. So on your journey, what do you say you've found the most challenging so far?
What's been the most challenging so far? I guess a few challenges for me, which is having lots of ideas and being able to execute them all at the same time. I think that's kind of relatively challenging. There's loads of things that I want to do, but obviously it's only 24 hours in the day. You've only got a certain amount of time, so that I've kind of found challenging. I mean, earlier in my career, I couldn't quite understand why I wasn't getting promoted at the speed I wanted to get promoted. So that was super challenging. And one of my previous bosses, who was really instrumental in my career, call out to Paulette if she's watching, is that she taught me about PI, so performance, image, executive sponsorship, and about performance being really important when you're more junior in your roles. But the more senior you get, performance is a given. And what's more important is how people think about you, so the image that you project. And executive sponsorship, so that's having people that will advocate for you. And I think once I got that, it became a little bit more easier for me to think, oh, right, I'm working really hard. Why am I not getting promoted? Because I wasn't doing all the other things as well. That would be something
That's a really good gem you just shared with everyone. So no, thank you so much for that.
This podcast is sponsored by the PRCA's Race, Ethnicity and Equity Board. Visit prca.org.uk/REEB to find out more.
And with your kind of employee hat on, even though we know you've got your own business now, but going back with employee hat on, right? What was it that you'd want from your employer? What to you made a really good working environment?
So for me, I know everyone has their different things, but for me, it's about having my work respected and my experience respected and being listened to, and in some ways being just left alone to get on with it. So one of the kind of analogies I use sometimes when I'm speaking is people go to finance with their mouths closed, but they come to comms with their mouths open. Everyone's got an idea of comms. Everyone knows how to do comms.
That's such a good one. It's so good.
And even if
I love that one. I'm going to nick that one. Sorry, that's so good.
And even if I think about all the different things that I've done within my career, some really difficult comms work, mergers, acquisitions, crises, etc. And then someone that's never worked in comms is basically telling you how to do it. And I just have to breathe and then breathe and then
breathe again.
Breathe. So those are the things that kind of help me. I mean, I'm less worried now because I work in a slightly different way. So when I was maybe in a permanent role, it was always about, okay, I need to do a good job and be better than the next person and make sure that my work is kind of recognised and that I'm rewarded in a certain different way. But obviously when you're interiming, those things matter less to me, and it's all about making sure that my experience and my skills are recognized and respected. And people talk about having that seat at the table. I'm really lucky that last few roles that I've had, my ideas have been respected, my work has been respected. And my last role at HSBC, I was sorry to leave, but I kind of went on to do something very different. So
yeah, amazing. Thank you so much. I think there's some really good tips there. And for you, what does kind of, everyone goes on about DEI. I feel like it's become a buzzword to a degree, but what does that look like to you?
I guess don't get me on the buzzword. Don't get me on the buzzword. Don't get me on the people that have suddenly found that there's a way to make money on DEI, and we can create our tools and our frameworks and not doing the work. But anyway, I'm not getting into that. So diversity, equity, inclusion. So it's about making sure that people have the kind of environment that they can thrive to be the best that they can be, no matter their background, no matter their ability, no matter their race, no matter their gender. And that's something that's really important to me. And I know, lots of us are on a journey. I'm learning new things every single day about diversity, equity, inclusion. But I think if you're willing to learn, if you're willing to kind of go on the journey and kind of put yourself in someone else's shoes, then that can make things, that can kind of help you to build an inclusive environment. And sometimes it's quite things you don't think about because you're not in someone else's shoes. So I went to an event about a year and a half ago that was up some spiral stairs, and there was no accessible lift. I'm like, well, who put this event together? Who put this event together? So it's about thinking about stuff like that.
Yeah. Good point. Okay, so moving into your kind of proudest moments now. Can you tell us your proudest moment? So it could be work, it can be personal, and you can also include a career highlight as well.
Oh my goodness me. So I guess there's lots of things I am proud of, but I guess one of the things that I guess I'm proud of the legacy that I've tended to have left at organisations that I've worked in. I go in and do a really good job and deliver and execute. But some that really spring to mind is some work that I did when I was at NatWest, and we were trying to kind of integrate lots of different organisations and people into kind of a culture. And we ran some absolutely amazing events, and it was pretty much early on into kind of my career and comms journey. And people still talk to me about that now. They say, yeah, my goodness, those events were amazing, and you included everyone, and delivered what they meant to do. So I kind of find that an absolute career highlight. There are just so many, people I've met. I love mentoring people. So one of the things that I like is when someone comes back to me and says, got that pay rise, got that promotion, got that new job. I kind of love those kind of highlights as well.
That's great. That's wonderful. I like those. Those are really nice. So moving a little bit into the industry thoughts. So, excuse me. So what would you say, what are your thoughts around how the industry will evolve over the next few years? Because I'm thinking, obviously there's this whole buzz around DEI. Will it continue? Will it falter? And then you've got the inclusion of AI and where things are going with that. So kind of what are your thoughts around, where we're evolving?
Yeah. It's interesting communication because there's always a shiny new tool. Yeah. So I'm old enough to remember when computers came, and then we had the internet, and then we had, now everyone's kind of talking about AI. But some things do not change. And they are that kind of people need to understand the basics of why people do what they do. They need to understand kind of some of the theory behind communication. So, in theory, anyone can start up a comms agency. We needed a laptop and a phone, to start up a comms agency. There are no barriers to entry. But I'm really encouraged by the fact that people want to kind of learn their craft, that they're interested in. AI is a super example about people kind of really trying to understand what it means for them, what it means for the kind of industry. So I'm kind of encouraged by kind of, the passion towards learning. What else do I see from the industry? Kind of more fragmentation. Okay. So in the pandemic, we saw, people setting up their own agencies. They don't want to work in that big corporate anymore.
Yeah.
They don't want to work in that big corporate anymore. So, and it's, relatively straightforward to do that, and people can make a real difference. And I'm it's really great seeing some of the agencies that set up just 3 years ago kind of thriving and going from strength to strength. And I'm waving at Cam here with the work that she's done with Golda. What else am I seeing? I think at some point, as people get older and kind of retire, I'm really hoping that the kind of demographics of the industry changes, and that PR or communications more broadly, the people working in it reflect more the people that that we're trying to serve. Pretty straightforward. So kind of that's something that I'm kind of hoping for as well. But ultimately, it doesn't matter what shiny tool comes out. The basics of PR and communication, been there since the days of Ivy Lee. So hopefully there won't be too much change there.
Yeah. Thank you for that. Okay. And then what would you say are your sort of key lessons you've learned throughout your career?
So interestingly, I was talking about this just yesterday, and that is PR is definitely one of those careers where it's not what you know, it's who you know. So notwithstanding what I've said about it's really important to understand the theory and being able to put that in practice, like pretty much all of the jobs I've had have been, obviously I've had to do the work of the interview and getting the role, but they've been pointed out to me by members of my network. And you should use your network, you build your network before you actually need it. So, and kind of meeting and engaging with people that are different to you, that got different experiences to you, that work in different organizations to you. So that's something that I've learned, the real importance of having a really good network. And it's just amazing where opportunities come from, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. No, I think that's really helpful as well. And what would you give advice to young people of colour in particular that are considering entering the industry?
So, oh goodness, it's a bit of a broad one. So, give it a go. It's an absolutely fantastic career. It's a fantastic career. If you're somewhere that you're not feeling right, then it probably isn't right. So move. So you don't have to move straight away, but make your plan to move. Get a mentor, get a sponsor, and ask for that pay rise. So, example, yeah. Because otherwise you might. What's the worst they could say? No. So when you're getting more and more piled onto you, just ask the question: does that involve an uplift in my benefits? Because we don't speak about it that much, but there is still both a gender and an ethnicity pay gap that needs to be kind of sorted out. So so ask, because the worst that can happen is people will say no. But if you're not happy in an environment, then make your plan to leave.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that's really important, Jen, there. So thanks for sharing that one. And onto mindset, one of my little favourite subjects is how do you deal with kind of your internal mindset war that we all have as human beings? So how do you kind of manage your self-limiting beliefs?
Do I have many self-limited beliefs? You mean things like I can't do?
Yeah. Self-limiting beliefs might be something. Well, things that you might try and talk yourself out of, and then you'd be like, no, actually I can do that. Like before, when you said actually when you first started in marketing, you might not have thought you'd ever be in comms. You might have thought, oh please, no.
Yeah.
And now look at you.
I guess I have a really good circle around me. I've got a really good circle of friends. So when I was thinking of leaving, I was an interim, so it wasn't that kind of secure, but setting up your own business is a big risk, and it's, can I do it? Will we get clients? How will it go? And so I guess that's a really good example of a self-limiting belief. But I have a really good circle. They say, go for it. Other people have done it. Why wouldn't you do it? You've got this, you've got this, you've got this. So I've got a really good circle of friends that kind of help and talk and kind of remind me that I where I've come from and what I can achieve. So that's one thing. And then the other one is I'm not all about work. I'm about balance as well. So I like to. I run badly, but go to the gym. I like to read. I go on holiday. There's more to. I like live music. There's more to me than just kind of the 9 to 5 kind of working all day. So I like to work's just one of the things that I do. So I guess that's kind of how I manage it. And yoga, Pilates.
Well, that's good. That is good. That's good advice. Good. So looking back on your journey, would you do it all over again?
Would I do it? Yes, I would actually. I would do it all over again. It's been a great journey. I might do it a bit quicker. I might have learnt about the pies a bit earlier, which would have got me up the ladder. But ultimately, you're meant to be where you are, yeah. So, lots of people think of careers as quite linear things that kind of go. I don't know if you can see it, that go like that, but more often they go like that. And I think it's Dolly Parton that says you don't get rainbows without rain. So you have to have the hard times to kind of help you learn and improve and stuff like that. So, I'm not saying that every job I've had has been, roses from day one. I've had some like pretty kind of tough gigs that have kind of taken their toll on me. But ultimately, I'm very happy with where I am now.
Yeah, that's brilliant. That's a lovely answer as well. That's nice. That's good. Because I always say your experiences, they create where you are, they help you to get you where you are. So I think that's really good. That's great.
Yeah.
So this is another question I like to ask because we're coming to my ending of the questions now. So what's the best and the worst advice you've been given?
The best advice will be about the pies. I think that's kind of the best advice that I've had. Performance image executive sponsorship. Think about how other people see you. Make sure that you kind of have sponsors. So that's been like super advice to me. And then the worst advice has got to be about the kind of your work will speak for itself, because your work doesn't speak for itself, does it? You have to speak for your work.
You do. You really do. That's so true. Absolutely. That's really interesting. That's a good one too. I mean, when I was speaking to Jenny Thomas about this, and she's cracking me up because she was saying her worst advice was someone telling her that she needs to be more aggressive. And I was like, yeah, that's really terrible. Because she has black women. We don't want to be, we really get the stereotype of like you're telling somebody to go out, like, yeah, no. But you get some really interesting ones. That's why I like asking this question. So yeah, I definitely love your best advice. I think that's been a very key gem. Yeah. And lastly, now, do you have any rules that you've implemented along your journey, to kind of help you? So like, it could be like, one of my rules used to be that if I didn't get promoted within an organization, then I shouldn't let that stop me, move out. You can move out and upwards or move out along the side and up, then you don't have to let that stop you. So that was one of the things that I kind of used to keep myself going. So is there anything that you kind of implemented that you've used to help along your career journey?
Yeah. I mean, I'm quite funny with my rules, and some of them sound a bit sillier than others. So obviously, I have my rule about if I'm in a board meeting or a leadership team meeting, like I will not be pouring the tea and coffee. That's not why I'm there. Someone else can pour the coffee, or if I just happen to be getting a drink, then I'm happy to offer one, but I'm not there to pour the tea and coffee. I generally kind of dress for the environment that I'm in, because I want people to be listening to what I'm saying, not looking at what I am wearing. Right. Which is an interesting thing. What other rules do I have for myself? Yeah, I don't I don't generally put up with nonsense. So I'm like comms is one of those roles where you can work with relatively senior people. So my rule of thumb is if the CEO of this firm doesn't speak to me like that, then you are not speaking to me like that. So I will definitely call it out. And I think one of the last people I call out, I'm just remembering the conversation now. I think sometimes it does surprise people, but you have to do it in a way that's kind of very like polite, Yeah. So my conversation with her went a bit like, "You're a managing director. You should know better. You should be setting an example that this is not the way to behave." And I think she was a bit.
But delivered nicely.
It was delivered nicely. It's all about how you deliver things, isn't it?
That's funny. Well, fair enough. Well, thank you so much for coming on, sharing your lived experience, sharing your journey with us. It's been really lovely talking to you. So for those who want to connect with you, where can they find you? Let them know.
They can find me on LinkedIn. So AnnMarie, as it is on the screen, AnnMarie Blake. They can find me on LinkedIn or our website, www.truecomms.com, or they can find me at Black Comms Network event. I think our next one is in September, isn't it? So yeah, do feel free to connect and reach out. I'm very approachable, so I'm happy to connect.
Definitely, she definitely is. Okay, everybody, so definitely do. So thank you so much. Thank you for sharing your time, giving you your flowers, say well done to you, and keep blazing your trail. And people are watching. You are inspiring people, so that's brilliant. So thank you.
Thank you. That's really sweet. It's really weird because I don't think of myself like that. So I was really honoured to be kind of invited. And obviously, as I said, it's not my natural place to be in front of the camera, but I'm kind of forcing myself to do more of it. So role modelling and all that.
Yeah, absolutely. We appreciate it, definitely. So my listeners, we will be back again soon with some more people from the wonderful world of communications. Until then, you guys take care and thanks for tuning in. Bye-bye.